Alexander Solzhenitsyn said that to destroy a people, you must first sever their roots. And I think this is what we've observed in Western countries over the past few decades. In universities, we've seen left wing activists masquerading as academics, polluting the minds of young people with notions about how their nation's history was filled with systemic racism and sexism. They've sought to promote the idea that white people should have a collective shame or guilt for the past sins of their ancestors. Globalism and multiculturalism have sought to marginalize the identities and cultures of European peoples. By making all Western cities as diverse and multicultural as possible, they've effectively become all the same. There's no single defining and unique identity anymore. The people make the place, after all, but when a city like London, for example, becomes only 45% Indigenous English, it's not surprising that it no longer feels or resembles an English city. The heart and identity of a place is irrevocably changed by internationalism, reducing a city or nation to being a province of a global order. We've recently witnessed the tearing down of statues in London and in America. The removal of monuments to a people's past disconnects them from their heritage. The vilifying of their historical figures further deracinates the people and dislocates them from a sense of belonging to their homeland. Just like an ethnic group's shared history, a people's culture is the story they tell themselves about themselves. So to rewrite it, to undermine it, devalue it, and outright expunge a culture and history is to make the people malleable and modifiable, to rob them of their values. This demoralization process makes it easier to bring about social and political and cultural change, i.e., revolution. This has always been a tactic of communist revolutionaries. It's important to say that I'm not even certain that our own political leaders are fully aware of how this process works or what it is that they're actually enabling. Western politicians are little more than puppets of global oligarchs, and they merely enforce their policies at a local national level. This article is from cityam.com. Sadiq Khan orders review of London's statues and street names. Wow, the first thing that came into my mind there was Constantinople. London Mayor Sadiq Khan has ordered a review of the capital's statues and street names after the toppling of the statue of an English slave trader by anti-racism protesters triggered a debate about the demons of Britain's imperial past. A statue of Edward Colston, who made a fortune in the 17th century from trading West African slaves, was torn down and thrown into Bristol Harbour on Saturday by a group of demonstrators taking part in a wave of protests following the death of George Floyd in the United States. All nations and all peoples have aspects of their history that they're not proud of, but this is an over-focusing on only negative aspects of Western people's pasts. History is history, and denying it is to deny reality. If the British people wish to have an open dialogue about what their street names should be and which statues they would like to keep, well, that's fine. Let them have that discourse. But it's clear these changes are being brought about because of the intimidation of an angry, violent, baying mob. Why would anyone acquiesce to that? Khan said a commission would review statues, plaques, and street names which largely reflect the rapid expansion of London's wealth and power at the height of Britain's empire in the reign of Queen Victoria. Our capital's diversity is our greatest strength. Oh, come on. Again with the diversity is our strength thing? Diversity destroys homogeneity, weakens social trust, and creates fragmentation, ethnic enclaves, and segregation. It's the exact opposite of strength. He says, yet our statues, road names, and public spaces reflect a bygone era, Khan said. It's a bygone era, Khan. It's the past. It's history, and it's fact. He said some statues would be removed. So these statues reflect the past, which is to say reality, and it is the past of the British people. It is therefore theirs. It belongs to them. If people don't like that history, they should perhaps go and live somewhere else. So let's talk about the Trojan horse element of totalitarianism. Now, as you know, I've previously spoken about the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, Agenda 2030, as part of Agenda 21, and it's all very utopian. But what have we witnessed this year? Well, the rule of law has broken down. Police now take their orders from governments and not the constitutions written to protect the people. That's the definition of a police state. All of this wonderful, shiny, happy peace on earth talk, all of this prosperity we're supposed to be having. This is the kind of rhetoric that precedes tyranny. Totalitarianism never introduces itself with a strong show of physical force in the beginning because people would rebel against that tyranny. It would fail. So there's always a Trojan horse strategy at work. The populace are won over by marketing, so propaganda and talk of nice things like equality and justice and environmentalism and clean energy and prosperity, an end to diseases and an end to crime and poverty. Who would be against this wonderful new world? It's funny though, the process by which this utopia is always achieved seems to be the loss of individual rights and freedoms. Think about it. Whether you agree with me or not, whether you agree with what I've been talking about when it comes to this crisis for the last number of months, one thing you cannot deny is that we're now living in a time where if an expert talking head in the media makes a suggestion using some data model and a graph, that person can then pressure the government with the aid of the media to implement a new social policy. The populace are complying with what their governments tell them to do. They are in lockstep. There's a spell that's been cast, and the masses can't see this. The government cites some expert who says people need to lock down, stay at home, flatten the curve, and the populace just listen and believe without question. They don't think for themselves or demand conclusive proof that the data is sound and accurate and that the lockdown, destruction of the economy, and the livelihoods of millions of people across the world is justified. They never ask these questions. Is it justified or not? Is it worth doing all of these things in the long run? Will the health of more people be affected under lockdown than if we don't lock down? Right? So people don't question whether the social distancing is even effective or necessary. They just kind of feel that it probably is, right? They simply do what they're told. This then sets a precedent for other things. The mandatory wearing of face masks on public transport or in shops or supermarkets. And then eventually it will be mandatory vaccines because again, if governments and media talking heads and experts, if they say this is what people have to do, it seems that people then go and do it. That's what we are witnessing under this crisis. Now, in the UK, face coverings are now mandatory on public transport. What is this? Headscarves in Iran? There's been talk of them becoming mandatory just to leave your house. This article is from the Metro. Making people wear face masks whenever they leave their home will curb second wave. Okay, we're supposed to just believe that. Compulsory use of face masks when out in public, along with the implementation of intermittent lockdowns, yay, more lockdowns, will help prevent a second wave of coronavirus, new research suggests. When it comes to these intermittent lockdowns, I'm assuming that they're not going to cause an increase in things like suicides, deaths of despair. And I say that because during the first lockdown, we had an increase in suicides. Would further lockdowns just cause more harm? The modelling study from the universities of Cambridge and Greenwich indicates that the combination of both methods could keep the R rate of infection below 1 long enough for a vaccine to be developed. Yeah, see, they come up with all these things, the R, right? We have to worship the mighty R. The R is angry today. Quick, lock down. Researchers said that even homemade masks with limited effectiveness can dramatically reduce transmission rates if worn by enough people, regardless of whether they show symptoms. It's funny how people are not getting a choice in what they wear on their faces. Once again, a data model and some researchers. This is how everything is going to be decided in our society now? Who voted for this? That this is how we do things now? The high priests of the science community should be obeyed without question? This is all designed to make people no longer trust their own intuition, their own common sense and rational thought process, to stop thinking for themselves. That's what this is about. Thanks to the media fear-mongering, the populace are in such a state of terror and panic, it seems that they cannot calmly or independently think for themselves, and so they just go along with things. And while these people are complying, they don't want to hear a counter-argument. Right? They don't want to be told that they're being fooled. They don't want to believe that they're being played for fools. So they socially enforce this face burqa on other people who refuse to wear it by shaming them or screeching about it, about how they're putting other people's health at risk by not wearing one, and how their individual rights and freedoms and their right to bodily autonomy is somehow selfish, that they're not thinking of other people.